Well, Biagio, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to have you here as part of this class. Why don't you go ahead and get us started by telling us a little bit about who you are and your background?
Sure. So Biagio Arobba. The CTO at Loop Hire. We're a startup in Omaha that we work with small businesses to help improve their recruiting. And I think a lot of people aren't entirely understand what recruiting is all about. So really 80% of it is working with other departments and consulting and helping them understand what their requirements are. And it's really consulting. A very small portion is actually looking for candidates. A number of the work is related to making sure everybody's doing their part and that people are making decisions in a timely manner. And so, I mean, it's a little bit like herding cats, but for small businesses that don't yet have a robust recruiting arm, they need, what do you call it? They have one person that does everything. So they need help basically. And so that's our focus.
Wonderful. Well, as the CTO, what does your role entail? What are you looking at as part of that recruitment process where you're applying your skill set?
Right. So, and I would say CTO at a startup too, because that makes a difference. So CTO at a very large established company probably does a lot different things than a CTO at a startup. So, I mean, I would say I also kind of do a lot of different things. I mean, I have to get in and do some of the programming. I feel very strongly that it's important that I know as much as I can about the technology that we're using and the different tools. And so that way I can help troubleshoot if needed, because it's one of those things like, it has to work. Things have to, keep moving along. And then I meet regularly with our operational side of the team to figure out what our next priorities are, what we have to keep doing. And that's ongoing. It's ongoing. And I also do a lot of the planning in terms of like, what are all the pieces that are going to need to come together for whatever it is we're doing to work. So we have a number of different things we're working on, and just making sure that I get ahead of it, make sure I do the research in advance, make sure I get in touch with people, line people up, any sort of talent or experience or knowledge we need. I try to definitely months in advance, already have a good network of people that I could talk to for different things. And then, find different developers. We actually do all contracting for all of our developers. We have some local, some international, and so just making sure everything's working smoothly, and also a little bit of managing expectations, but I feel like it really comes down to communication. That makes a big difference there.
Wonderful. What kind of software development are you using? Are you building back end? Are you building a front end? What are you developing within the organization?
Yeah, so the actual tool or the platform that was put together when I first got here was in PHP. And so then I decided if we were gonna sort of replace everything, if we can keep as close to some of the original stuff as possible, I wanted to do that. And so I found this, it's actually well known, it's been around for a long time, but it's this tool called Laravel. It's a software package framework called Laravel. And it works with PHP in order to help you build like web pages. But it's the funny thing is I was a little bit hesitant to go back to PHP because I've not done that for a long time. But I will say that PHP today as a language is like a lot more mature than it was like 10 years ago. And so it actually does have some nice features. Plus you combine that with a really great framework like Laravel. And I don't feel the same stress as I used to with PHP. It's not as clunky as it used to be. And so, that it's basically a PHP framework. And then Laravel has an ecosystem of services for deploying onto like AWS. And so we use that. And then really most of it, so when I first met Chris, and we hit it off instantly. I met him at a Chamber of Commerce event, and I said, look, if I'm going to help, I want to understand everything that you're trying to do. I want to understand, like the entire set of details. There's this thing called the illusion of explanatory depth, um, IOED, which is the psychology literature or something. But it's basically that people think they really know something until they start to explain it. And then they realize, oh, wait, I don't really know this thing. And in the technology world, you really have to know everything. And so you start to realize that there's so much that you need to keep it simple. Like the less I do, the more I can unpack that little piece that I'm working on. And the more you realize there's a lot to that. And so, we spent a week and I put this Google Doc together. We call it the kitchen sink doc. And it just has everything explained out in terms of what we're trying to do. And then that really helped because then I can look at it and see, okay, are we missing anything? Do we need to improve on anything? And I felt like it was actually a pretty solid plan. And that's why I decided to help out. So we have a very, very simple UI, very simple concept. And it's just, basically a good workflow to help keep everybody on task. In fact, I built a whole compliance section, which gives us, up to the minute knowledge of where anybody is at in our system, how long they've been waiting for anything, because our goal is to make sure that the process runs smoothly and everybody's doing their part. So we have the ability to sort of monitor and keep track of that. And then, of course, all that requires data. So, one of the early things we did, it was actually at the recommendation of one of our contractors, which I think it was really a great thing. Sometimes I forget how important it is to start from the data. And so what we did is a lot of modeling, a lot of like, here's like what tables should look like, here's what services we're going to use, here's what the interfaces are like, and just really like listing out stuff. And I pulled a lot of the original like knowledge on doing like data normalization. Because even if you're working with relational databases or even like JSON documents, the same kind of concepts apply. So just making sure that our data looks good. And that's a really important part. Anytime I do any new features, new anything, I make sure to go and review and make sure that we have a good data plan in terms
So
of the structure.
with that data plan, are you looking at what information you're collecting, how you're collecting it, and then how you're analyzing? You talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah. So, and I think this is where like, you wear many hats at a startup where that kind of comes into play. And so not only did I want to know that we could explain everything, that we could literally like detail by detail explain what happens. You need to sort of have a understanding of the business, an understanding of like what makes the business successful and what are the customers going to most likely resonate with, those kinds of things. So let's see, I always have to not just keep an eye on the technical stuff that needs to be done, but also like, why are we doing it? And how is this going to make an impact in the business? So that way we can be more strategic about like what gets done. I also meet with Chris and other people on the team like weekly to just, and every time we get a new thing done, it's like, let's make sure that whatever we're working on the next is going to be the most important thing. I lost your question for a second though. What was that? What was that
Oh,
question?
how the data plan, and I think in part of that, or what is the data plan? What does it look like? And you did walk through that, but I think one thing that you touched on that's really important, and I think for this class that adds a lot of value, is as this startup role, you're really stepping into understanding how the business works, not just how the technology works, but how the business works. And as an MBA graduate, you're going to have a good understanding how the business works, but you're not necessarily going to know how to apply it into the technology. So what kind of things are you looking at from a technologist perspective when it comes to the business that make the most sense or can be the most impactful to what you're doing? Does that make sense for the framing of that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the thing is that it's really hard to sort of bridge both sides. And I've sort of been on both sides and I can really understand, what that divide looks like. When you spend all of your time learning how to make something, you're not necessarily learning how it's going to be used in the wild or how it's going to become a successful business. You're just really spending a lot of time learning how things work. And you talk to other very technical people, and they maybe work at a university, or they work in a research lab, or they work, in the industry, but it's all just like, give me the requirements, let me make this thing happen, sort of thing. Maybe if you have a large enough company, I mean, even I've heard even at larger companies, this happens all the time, is projects that just always go to the wayside because they just weren't thoroughly managed or tracked well enough. So that's really the trick. That's the thing, and you're going to find a lot of people out there that are in the technical side that's all they think about. I was kind of fortunate enough. I came from a family of people that ran businesses, and I did my own contracting for a while. I made some mistakes, and then I had the chance to participate in this Lean Launchpad program that they were offering at UNO, and it was this nationwide program. But we had a cohort that I got to be a part of, and just really learned the strategy side around startups and marketing, and that really kind of kicked off my journey. Plus, reading different books and stuff. So the thing is that it's allowed me to really let go of the technology a bit and really start to spend more time in the, marketing and business and strategy side of things. So that really helps. I feel like it helps a lot. But I also feel like we can't just stay in our own side. We have to just understand there's another perspective out there. I don't know if I should bring this up, but there's this funny story about how, there was this company. It's large Fortune 500 company, and they said, oh, we're gonna move all our jobs overseas because that works really well for our company. We don't need these technology people to be here. So they moved them offshore. And then the company was in turmoil, and they basically, all the VPs that made that decision basically got axed then. And then I knew a guy who had to call back a number of people saying, hey, we made a mistake. Can you please come back and work for us? Sort of thing. So, I mean, the thing is, it's not just an engineer's problem. It's everybody's problem, to make sure that the company is making good decisions.
I think
yeah,
there's you have those who are going to just execute on the requirements, but to manage the project from a perspective from a manager, you want to make sure to tie it back to why, not just how, which is what I heard you say. What are some of the things that you do to make sure that you're tying the how back to the why?
Right. So for one, is just making sure that people can explain clearly what it is they're trying to accomplish, what it is they're trying to do. And then the other thing too, and this is where I think there needs to be a certain level of trust, is you have to expect that the person on the business side is going to ask you to do the right things. They're going to ask you to do sound things. And I don't mean right as in is this a good thing to do or not? I mean that they're going to know what the strategy is, and they're going to not be overusing your time. Because when you make something, it takes a lot of resources, and it's very, very expensive. So if you can, in conversation, solve a lot of problems and a lot of unknowns, then that's going to be the cheapest way to come up with a request to the technology side of things. Because if you don't, you say, oh, we have this idea this week, and now we have this new idea, and oh, let's do this and let's do that. You're really wasting your most valuable or one of your most expensive resources. And so I think that's really important. I've seen a lot of times where people would just sort of live in this fantasy world on the marketing side and the business and strategy side of things, because they would think, well, anything could be possible, and I definitely like to try to make anything possible as much as possible, as much as I can, or figure out ways to bridge different gaps and stuff. And that's very important, especially from a commercialization side, from a marketing side. The idea is that there's limited resources out there, there's limited capabilities, and you're trying to figure out how to connect the dots, right? And so that's important to do that. But if you're asking the IT team to invent telepathy, or not telepathy, but like, what do they call that when you transport from one place to another?
Teleportation. Yeah.
Teleportation. Yeah. Yes, the technology seemed to develop teleportation, and then say, hey, what's wrong with this idea? Why am I getting pushback? It's that's why. And so part of it is having a conversation. And that's where I think that's the connecting part, is the conversation. Never expect it to be something that's like a one-time, here, we're going to get this thing together. And I'll tell you, even on the technology side, they'll fall in that trap too, because they're like, look, I don't want to think about all these like stressful business side, marketing side of things, because I never was trained or never learned that side of things. So just tell me the requirements and I'll go work on it. So on both sides, they want things to be simple, and that's the danger, is that you're going to go off and you're going to execute and you're going to spend months and lots of dollars, and you come back and you're like, oh, this was the wrong thing. And so instead, making sure it's always a continual conversation, and that it's not a one-time plan, but it's an ever communicating, ever evolving plan. And that's why what I'm always doing is I'm saying, look, whatever we're going to do, we're going to be spending a lot of resources. So what's the next thing that's the most important? Then if we can get that thing done, would make an important part of our business. And I think, so on the other hand, though, that's where I think the fantasy land can come in, because somebody say, well, the most important thing then is if we can do this, accomplish this teleportation, So one of the things, and this was especially at a company I was at before, it was actually a hardware related startup. And it was really cool. They made these devices that would basically track movement around a store, and they could help provide like analytics to like locations. And I think we were in like hundreds of stores. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not thousands now. A lot of big name brands, companies that were using our technology. So let's see here. What you're asking of the technical team, you got to ask yourself, is this a research project, something that's more suited to like a university or a research department somewhere that's all they do, is they go and try things and they fail a lot and they experiment, and then maybe they'll come up with something. As a business, you don't have that luxury. You have to be very, very realistic in what can we accomplish within a certain period of time, and you have to know then that you can check off all the yep, we can do these things. Because if you can't, you run a real risk of doing something that's going to then like not pan out, basically. And then you've just wasted a lot of developer resources. So that's another thing too, is just being very clear on, are these things that I'm asking things can be done? And if they can't be done, also just saying, well, what are ways we can bridge that gap, involving everybody in the conversation in terms of how can we come up with a good enough option, maybe, if we can't get the option that we want, sort of thing. And with data is in that realm too, because you don't always have all the data you want. It's not always like you could always rearrange it and make it like easier to process, but you can't wish for more data if it's not there, or for the types of data you'd like to see. So you have to work with what you got, and then figuring out ways to supplement it with what you can, sort of thing.
I think one thing a lot of companies, especially early companies, will do is they'll try to build the iPhone when all they need is a hammer. And so you get these scope creeps, or there's not enough for that conversation to break down the problem to what is the thing that's actually going to solve or create a solution to the problem we're trying to solve, instead of what the dream is or the big deal. Because if your teleportation, the problem is moving people from point A to point B efficiently, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe you just need a car that runs better or faster,
right,
or a plane, right? You don't need to jump people from one place to another with technology that doesn't exist. So when it comes to that data that you're collecting in your organization, that process, the ability to see where people are you turning that into a dashboard to visualize it? How do you actually see the current status that you have within your platform?
No, that's a good question. I'm super big on, you have to be able to see the data in order for you to make decisions off of it. And so it's an ongoing thing. I mean, we probably have like 10% of the reports that I'd like us to be looking at, they'd like us to have, So it's definitely on the list as like an ongoing thing to build out. And, as the need comes up, I'll put something together. So like with the work we do with like recruiting, we're working with a number of companies that need us to hire in different job categories. And so being able to see month over month, like which are the categories we're spending the most time in helps. One thing that I will say, it's really cool. I don't know if it's a secret, can't give this out. I don't know. But is that because our platform is working with small businesses in a way that recruiters typically don't, we're starting to reach a lot of businesses that don't work with recruiters and in industries that I feel like don't normally, you see recruiting for. We're doing a lot of like skilled trades and a lot of like service roles that we're helping fill that normally don't get filled by recruiting. So I think that's really neat. And to be able to see that, can make a difference. Because if somebody's like, well, who's in your market, who are you working with, sort of thing, we can look at it and say, here's what we got. The other thing too is that there's this in the work that we do, there's this what do you call it, like flywheel effect, where if we start to get more people in one industry and we start to fill both sides, we can start bringing more candidates, which helps us bring in more customers, and then we have this like virtuous cycle sort of thing. We should be able to like see that to some extent, to see that here's where our efforts have gone. If we spend a lot of time in like, I don't know, helping hire accountants, for example, but it turns out that in our data, we have a lot more there related to like skilled trades, we're mismatching our efforts, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that too, because we may be wanting to build more of an industry along accounting, for example. But we just need to have a way to monitor that and say, look, did we spend enough effort in this point? And do we spend enough effort like in this market and in that market? Do we spend enough effort? And the right, both sides, so it's balanced out. And that's the other thing too, is that not only does it help you make more gut level decisions, I think helps you maybe just see things a little bit better, so you can make decisions. I think it's important to try to provide reports that allow people to see where their efforts are at and make sure that they're all in the right spots. And so that's pretty much the example I gave earlier, where we could have different industries, but we have to make sure that the parts that we're working on all match up, so that what can happen a lot of times is somebody's like, look, we have these 20 industries, for example, that we're working on, and the work is all scattered. And so, but when you really look at it, you're working on all the wrong parts for each of them. So, the idea is that, data can help you see, visualizing the data can help you see that your efforts are matching with the actual, what's going to make things turn in the company. So
How often are you running those reports? Is that a constant ongoing, or is it weekly?
No, so for us, actually, we have a dashboard and we have a whole bunch of like admin side pages we can go to that we can basically see those reports instantly. The other thing that we're working on is notifications. We get a lot of notifications on stuff. And then I make sure that we could link in to see things from the notification. So notification, click, good, you get report, sort of thing.
Very cool. When you look at how you're using that data and visualizing it, are you able to then make those business decisions? Like, obviously you're clarifying what you're trying to create, but how much is that really affecting that? If you're seeing a buildup in a particular industry, are you then going and looking for more employees there? Or are you slowing down? Like, where are those levers getting applied as you see the visualization of the data?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it in two types. I think of operational and strategic. And so operational is the insights that you need daily to make sure that everything is running smoothly. And then strategic is, so an example with those different markets where, are we spending enough time in each on the right side? Because it's a multi-sided market for us. So we need both sides. We need the job seekers and we need the employers that are posting jobs, right? That, some of that is operational, in that if you're not spending time doing those things, then, the wheels aren't turning. But some of it's strategic, where it's like, okay, where should we be spending our time? right? And so I feel like I really start focusing first on the operational side and making sure that we have that. So prioritization is that based on our knowledge of what everybody's supposed to be doing. And that's because we've verbalized it and we've explained it. So we know, do we have reports that help us make sure that those things are happening as we've expected them through our verbal plans and writing them down? So that's the operational side of things. And then the strategic side is, how do I know that we're doing things, that's helping grow the company and that we're, reaching our audiences in the right way, sort of thing.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if that answered your question. I think
no, it does. I think being able to take a look at the data, visually represent it, and then understand what it's impacting. Is it the strategy, or is it something I need to be concerned about for the day-to-day? Is it invaluable? Because the data will get visualized, but understanding the differentiation of what that impact, what that data means is crucial to the whole purpose of data mining and getting those visualizations. It's not just enough to make it look good. You got to have actionable insights from that information.
Yep.
Well, Biagio, I really appreciate you taking time with us. Are there any last thoughts that you have for our students before we close?
I can't think of anything. Let's see. I did make a few notes here. Planning and expectations. I think I touched on most of it. Nope. I guess, sorry, I don't really have anything.
No worries.
I think we covered a lot of the stuff that I was interested in touching on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And if our students would like to reach out to you, is there a way? What is the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn, Biagio Arobba, CTO at Loop Hire. And then the other way is email me. So Biagio is BIAGIO at loophire.com.
Wonderful.
Feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Biagio. We appreciate you being with us today.
Sounds good. Glad to help.